Welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining us again. Our guest today is Dianna Anderson. She's the co-founder and CEO of Cylient, a transformative training and consulting company dedicated to evolving leadership through meaningful and purposeful conversations. She's the founding member of the International Coaching Federation and has held the prestigious Master Certified Coach designation for nearly 2 decades. She's a thought leader in coaching and human development and has co-authored a comprehensive textbook exploring the return on investment of coaching engagements. Dianna is driven by a profound belief in human potential, and her current mission is to establish Untying the Knot as a global language that bridges divides and empowers people with diverse perspectives to tackle challenges in a collaborative way. I had a great conversation with Dianna, but again, enough from me. I'll hand over to today's guest, Dianna Anderson. Our guest today is Dianna Anderson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Cylient. And Cylient is a leadership development training company where we prepare people to have the kinds of conversations they're currently avoiding. And we do this using an approach that I created after decades of working as a coach. And it's called Untying the Knot. It's super simple. If something's not happening, there's a knot. And so instead of using the usual approach, which is kind of pulling on the knot and making things worse, we teach people how to actually untie knots together.
Yeah, so without specifying a particular leader, tell me let's use a time frame here in the last 5 years. Give me some sense in your mind of some of those key leader traits that you see out there that are positive and maybe some that are not so good. And when I use 5 years, it's going to be pre-COVID.
Well, I think one of the biggest outcomes of the pandemic, if we kind of look across that time frame, is that leaders really began to appreciate more deeply the the importance of caring for people, of making sure that people feel like they belong, that they can contribute, and had to get kind of creative about how to do that when the pandemic hit and we all got separated. So I think the pandemic really reshaped our understanding of the significant contributions that people make to everything we do. So I think it's a positive that that has become more a part of the leadership conversation. Um, I think one of the things that where I'm seeing leaders struggle right now is just overwhelmed with the amount of complexity that they have to deal with now. Now, not only like caring for people, but if you just look at the volume of major issues that leaders are having to contend with right now, it is truly absolutely overwhelming. And so I think one of the things they're really struggling with is how to make progress on so many fronts at the same time.
Yeah, I think that speaks to on your last point, sorry, it speaks a lot to self-management as well as the management potentially of the organization that you're in. And I think you're on a very dangerous pathway if you think you're going to be able to do everything and be all things to all people, given the amount of work that is coming everybody's way. I think everyone's workloads are exponentially increasing. More, um, and I think your point is well made around the leader and whether or not they can address that. I guess one question to bring in here, and talking communications just for a little bit. Do you think and I won't say culturally, but do you think we're good at communicating that we need to have a better system and be able to say that out loud to colleagues and or reports to say we need something better here so that we're all functioning better and so that I'm not burning out in the next year and making your life more crappy and my life more crappy, my health more crappy, all of the things that go with negative outcomes of not being able to open up and talk about how do we do things better without a degree of burnout.
Yeah, I think that is in some ways the crux of it right now. I think people can feel that old ways of leading and thinking about things really are not working in this super, hyper connected, really convoluted world. Yet part of the old rules are you can't say it's not working. And so I think it's kind of hard to talk about the fact that we keep doing the same thing and it seems to feel like it's getting worse, not better. But we don't really have the skills sometimes to have that kind of conversation in a way that comes across as positive and appreciative and with the intention of actually trying to make things better. And so what I often see is that instead people just dig in harder and get more frustrated, that they're not able to push things forward. And I think the essence of what's happened is our old ways of leading and many of our beliefs and assumptions about what makes leadership work are really rooted in the last century when the world was much simpler, challenges were much more straightforward, and mostly we managed things through things. And so I think what a lot of leaders maybe haven't fully grasped is that in a world where there are just so many inputs and so much complexity, our ability to actually talk about things, including the fact that things are maybe not working as well as we would hope, um, is how we're going to get things done. And that things are probably not going to happen as quickly as they used to. And that we're going to be untying a lot more knots together. So to your point, I think our ability to talk about the fact that things are not always moving forward as quickly as we'd like is the place to begin.
Yeah, very reasonable advice and a good way to look at the issue. One thing that you brought up that is very interesting, and it's an ongoing piece of a thought piece for me that I've never put pen to paper on, but I think somebody will beat me to the punch, is to what degree have our theories on leadership actually developed to the point where they don't reflect 160, even 70 years ago, and are reflecting more what is the environment in which leaders find themselves now. And without going into the human impacts of COVID, which were monumentally bad, the changes in what is expected at work, particularly for white collar employees, not so much blue collar or those that need to be on front lines like emergency services, ambulance, police that can't work from home to do their job. They need to be out and about. That new models of leadership need to recognize certain things about the environment in which we operate, the people that choose to work with us in those environments, and then how do you manage those things to get the best outcome for your organization or for your not-for-profit or whoever it is that you're working for. And um, look, there are so many theories of leadership that I'm sure somebody's working on something that's bridging that gap. But what is interesting to me is whoever is doing that work down the track, and myself personally, there's another element that we won't talk about now, but it's definitely something for thought down the track if you'll come back and chat with me, is around leader capability. So there
Sure.
are individuals in leadership roles that you would think, are they good strategic thinkers? Do they apply foresight thinking, futures thinking? Are they, what's the word? Are they empathetic? Do they know how to communicate? For me, that list isn't exhaustive, but I would say, and this is my argument here, I'd be love to get your view on this, that
Sure.
if you're not working on any one of those to some degree, you're not going to be the most effective leader that you can be. Now, before you answer, I'm not saying they're the only capabilities that are out there. I'm sure I could get argued by any number of practitioners and um, researchers to say, well, it's more than that, Eric. But me having lived some time in a leadership role as well as researched in this area, I think you can't escape those things. If you don't have a leader that can't see a pathway forward and can't bring people with them, they don't know how to speak to their people to get them on that pathway. and they can't see what are the many possible pathways, which are the ones that are actually realizable, you're not going to be as effective as you could be. What's your thoughts on that? There's a lot of stuff there, but in general, what do you think, Diana?
Well, well, let me the image that I get as you're describing this approach to leadership is one of sort of an interplay of balance. You know, as you talk about foresight, you talk about kind of looking into the future. You're talking about being able to see patterns and get a sense of where things going. And then when we talk about empathy and the ability to connect and communicate, it's like how do you bring those ideas back and connect them with human beings and get them excited about the possibility that you see? And I think what's kind of new in leadership is the need to have a dynamic balance between these two hemispheres. You know, the sort of technical, tactical, and human side of let's get it done in the moment, with our more forward thinking kind of what's emerging, where are we headed with this, which is really the guide we have that works best in a complex world. And so I think people getting their head around the fact that that's what leadership looks like right now is kind of new. And it's hard to do it when you're sort of spinning in an environment where you're still using old approaches to try to solve new problems. So I have a lot of empathy for leaders right now. I can't imagine um, what do I want to say? It's just a really complex time to be sorting all of these things out. But I hope that that image of sort of bringing a little bit more of a balance to it maybe is helpful.
Yeah, don't disagree. In fact, the ability to spot those patterns and how you can weave in and out is important. One additional question I'll bring here, if I can, and you mentioned at the start of the conversation around a concern you've got around leadership is what conversation around leadership aren't we having that we should be having?
Hmm, interesting question. Well, I would bring it back to kind of my point earlier, which is it might be time to kind of put the cards on the table and say, you know, so many of these approaches that we really have kept us safe and have been the things that have delivered you know, results in the past aren't working anymore. Like I wish we could actually have that conversation and say, what do we need to do instead? And I think the real thing to give thought to is I think a lot of leaders know that we need to change, but our current environments don't make it safe for leaders to change. And therefore, it is increasingly difficult. There's some wonderful work by Damon Santola in a book called Change, and one of the things I really took away from it was that actually asking people to change is one of the most frightening things you could do, and it becomes exponentially more frightening as you have more reputational risk. So it's really hard for our most senior leaders to actually embrace new ways of doing things. And so I think the bigger conversation we have is how do we make it safe to let go of some of these old ways of doing things and start to experiment with what's going to work now for us in this moment?
So, thank you for bringing up the issue of change. What immediately sprang to mind as you were speaking then was people being people will jump on change that they want or they like versus change that is not so geared to this is going to be awesome for me. Um, let's get on board and support it. And I think it's that change that is more unknown, that is potentially going to change the structure of systems, that is going to change the way that people communicate, that could flatten an organizational structure, could make it more hierarchical, whatever it looks like. Um, yeah, change is difficult, and I've never had a chance to have this conversation with previous guests, but I have a lot of time and respect for those in the change management game that have to do this and try to convince not just senior management, but key people that the change in process, the change in thinking needs to look like this because of this. And yeah, there's lots of buy-in that's required, but reputational risk for those leading that is massive. And if you value your job, I don't care what organization you're in. If you think you're putting your job at jeopardy, you may not take the plunge, not because it's there's good reasons not to do it. It's you want to keep your
Mhm.
job.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. In a world of uncertainty, we want to try to have as much certainty as we can. And so it makes the conversation more challenging and increasingly more important as far as I'm concerned. So
So
yeah,
let me ask this. You're based in the US at the moment.
I am. Yeah.
Okay. With what you see in the leadership landscape from a US perspective, do you think the US does leadership and these conversations better than outside of the US? Do you have something to compare it to? Is it something you've ever put your mind to?
Um, I can't say specifically. What I can say specifically is our workshop, Coaching in the Moment, which really fundamentally teaches people how to do kind of what I'm talking about, which is combine the you know thing side of managing people and managing things into one approach to leadership. We have taken it around the world. I mean, our clients and some of our consultants have gone to many, many different countries. And it doesn't matter where we go, we find the same thing, that leaders still believe it's their job to have the right answers, to control people, to get things done. And when we introduce the idea that that works well on things, but when it comes to people, that it's igniting insight, inspiring people to choose to change is the way to really bring the best out that people have to offer, and that the artistry of leadership is bringing these things together. We haven't found a place where that didn't resonate or where that wasn't an aha for people. So I think I really can fundamentally say I think the core beliefs that we collectively hold about what it means to be a good and effective leader are global. And what's cool about that in an interesting way is if we can begin to change those beliefs in leaders globally, I think we have the potential to actually create waves of global change because these businesses are connected. So I know it's kind of a different way of answering your question, but I think we are united in that belief. And I think that actually could be an incredible lever for not only organizational change, but even potentially global change.
No, that's a brilliant response. And in some ways, you've done some cross-cultural work in terms of the leaders that you're talking to. And if you've been to these other countries and are doing this work and you're finding the same things over and over again, then the problem is not just, potentially an American or Australian or New Zealand one. It's across all countries, and that the mindset that the leader needs to do X, Y, Z, or he or she is not leading versus managing. And this is another interesting one when you talk about command and control. Um,
Mhm.
Leaders shouldn't be about, no one should be about command and control. You should be inspiring your people to do the work optimally, or at least have people willing enough to get in and give the job a go. But this idea that you need to control the humans that work with you, your colleagues. I hate using human resource as a term because humans aren't a resource, they're human beings, right? And the this fundamentally leads to something, and would love to get your view on this around do you believe broadly, and I'm not talking just to US, but from what your experiences bring to you, do you think there's still, I can't even find the words here, like a hangover effect with leaders as they're coming through, even though we've moved away, hopefully, from the worst aspects of traditional leadership models around command and control, that um, current leaders are looking at people as human beings that happen to be working with them that you need to develop versus another resource in the business. And should we not need them, or they're not fit for purpose, we find some way to get them out of the business and we get somebody else.
If I was to take it just down to the essence, I think the confusion often for leaders is they don't understand that how you manage a thing, which by the way, command and control is appropriate to an inanimate object. Like you can command how a process is going. You can demand it's going to do this. You can set these expectations. Cool. I mean, we want that kind of linear, logical, problem-solving type thinking for things. The problem we have is when we treat people like they're things and try to command them and, demand and well, people don't work like that. And I think that's where the major miss is, that we don't do maybe as good a job as we could helping people understand that when it comes to inspiring people to change, it takes a different approach to leadership because people have to choose to change. You can't force, I mean, some people would say you can force them, but compliance is very different than inspired action. And there are very few jobs right now where compliance is sufficient. What we increasingly need as the world gets more convoluted is people to be creative, to be collaborative, to trust each other, to take risks together. And they will never do that if you command them to do it. It's not going to happen. In fact, all you do is frighten people, and frightened people do the opposite. They shrink back, they protect themselves, they don't speak up. And so our intentions around how we work with people are actually creating the opposite of what we need in this moment in time. But I think that's the insight that many managers are just missing right now.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving that response a crack. It answered my multiple questions that I just threw at you then. Yeah, and it speaks also in my mind for what this is worth, that whether you're in a specified leadership role or you're in a managerial role, managers are also leaders in their own right. And trying to, if you're going to get a culture change particularly in larger organizations, management shouldn't see themselves as separate to senior leadership. They're all leaders. They're just at different levels. And that, to me, that changes the mindset. So, and if we're talking traditional management here, and I'm not for a second saying all organizations do this, but maybe some of that old world thinking is stuck in those middle tiers of management where the expectation is I've got to manage my resources, I've got to report to a board of the leaders up here.
Mm-hmm.
The path of least resistance is to treat people like things and have that command and control process because you just want the outcome. I think with a little thought around that, could you inspire people to achieve those results and more by actually getting them involved and getting them into the process where they're wanting to contribute and are seen to be heard? Um, this is the staff from management, and I know that doesn't cross all managerial levels, but I think the divide between what is a leader and what is a manager, I think that's so blurred these days that in my mind, treat all of those people as leaders and then start educating, well, what does a leader do in these roles? Now, yes, the CEO is a different to a mid-tier manager in the same business, but ultimately they're trying to achieve a vision. They're trying to make the organization go forward. They're just doing it from very different perspectives. So, um, just going back to the idea about having some conversations around tying those knots around, well, how do we get that to happen? I think it has to happen through the whole organization, not just one part of it, and hope that it permeates through and that everyone picks up on it and we all understand it in the same way.
Uh, yes, multiple things. One is I think everyone's swimming in the same water. So I think all the leaders all along kind of have these older beliefs in many ways, and it's hard again to make a big transition without kind of doing it together. So I think one element I would say is um, I think it's really important to begin to have conversations about the strategic importance of really cultivating people who can be creative, who can connect, I mean, particularly if you think about your business from a strategic point of view, unleashing that kind of creativity and those ability to kind of come up with new ideas is essential. And so I think there's a strategic conversation to happen there. But in the spirit of making it safer, one of the things that I really recommend when you want to make a big change like this is like, don't do everybody all at once. Like, that's just sort of overwhelming and kind of blows everyone's brain. So, when we are bringing coaching in the moment in and teaching people how to do the untying the knot process, I usually recommend try to find like a division or a team, like a group of people that are kind of more forward thinking, maybe the people who are going to benefit the most from making the change, and really support the heck out of them to have a successful outcome with it. So pick a division, pick whatever, really put the energy into it, support them top to bottom to be successful in trying this new change. Capture the stories of the success that they've got, capture the results that they attain from actually changing how they interact with each other. This makes it safe for the small group to change. It creates great stories that you can share with the rest of the organization. It can give you some proof that this is going to really deliver some results, and it makes it safer for others to try. And so once you do that, you can go to another division. Once you've done a couple of them, well, then you can take it enterprise wide, and there's going to be a positive wave you could ride to that new way of leading. And that's kind of how you want to think about change. Um, and I think it's like how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, right? It's like you find what I call the imaginal cells, like the part of your organization that has the DNA that says, we could do this differently, and support them. And in that way, I think that kind of metamorphosis to a new way of leading could actually be a fun and really positive experience versus a scary one.
Yeah, could not disagree, and thank you for sharing your wisdom on that. So to conclude, Diana, one final thought for you to share with my listeners or those watching the video cast here. What what is the one piece of advice you would give to, let's say, emerging leaders about their engagement with their workforce? What would you advise a very new leader to be thinking about when looking at their team about how to better engage with them? Just the one bit of advice.
Yeah. One of the concepts we teach in coaching in the moment is the idea of getting curious about how other people see the world. And the one piece of advice I would tell you is that everyone has their own unique worldview. And so when you're looking at someone and you maybe you're confused about why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe you're having a reaction to it, like just stop and choose to get curious about how that person is looking at the situation and ask yourself, how might that make sense to them? And I think it's going to help you connect with that person in a more positive and a productive way. So the next time you feel yourself having a reaction, just stop, shift gears, get curious, ask yourself, how could that make sense to them? And see if you can find a place of commonality.
Very, very nice and a lovely way to finish the discussion. Diana, thank you for your time today.
Oh, such a pleasure, Eric. Thanks for having me.
No worries. For those listening, this has been the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for your time. Have a great day and rest of your week, and we'll catch you all on the next episode of the podcast.